Vampire Counts has an all-right matchup against Vampire Coast. I would say usually the Vampire Coast has the advantage in that matchup, but it's very slight. So Vampire Counts is actually really good against the two... Oh, it's decent against the two meta factions. Now, what are the weaknesses of Vampire Counts? And what will people counterpick if you pick Vampire Counts first? That is High Elves, Dark Elves, and Lizardmen. And unfortunately, you can only ban 2 of them. So you got to get good at one of those 3 matchups.
What about Wood Elves?
Wood Elves, okay, so people don't pick Wood Elves against Vampire Counts, not because Wood Elves have a terrible chance at winning, but because whoever wins that battle is from the load screen. It's just not a fun one. Like, Wood Elves can win from the load screen by going way super air, and Vampire Counts don't prepare for that, or Vampire Counts can win because they prepare for the air, but they don't have enough to get to the Way Watchers. Or if Vampire Counts go full Cav build, and then you go Tree Blob, that won't be very fun for the Vampire Counts player. So the reason why you ban Dark Elves, though, and not Wood Elves is that not only is it usually one on the build screen, Dark Elves usually wins more often out of the build screen.
Yeah, like there's more Dark Elves can do to win than vampires can counter. Like vampires can counter anything Wood Elves can do, and Wood Elves can like go hard in one direction to try and counter the vampire counts as well. Like I think it's pretty even, but it's kind of build, like maps matter a lot. It's just not very fun because there's air spam and then there's tree blobs.
Vampire Counts tends to be a counterpick faction more than anything nowadays. If you first pick it, it's really awkward because, like I said, they only have 2 bans and there's 3 factions that are really good against them. So usually the situations you find Vampire Counts counterpicked is against Empire. Let's see here. Empire, Chaos always bans them. Let me go through the list of factions that the matchup actually shows up. Bretonia. Let me go through. Beastman always bans them, so you're never going to see that matchup. Bretonia, you can see vampires being played. Dwarves, I actually think, I'll tell you guys, a lot of people think Dwarves versus Vampire Counts is Dwarves favored. I think it's pretty heavily Vampire favored. Empires, you're going to get the Vampire Count matchup. High Elves, they're going to be banned. Well, you should not pick Vampire Counts into High Elves. That's a bad choice. Lizardmen, same thing. Norska is an even matchup that a lot of people like to pick. It's probably slightly Vampire Count favored, but it's fun. Skaven, they tend to ban Vampire Counts. And if they don't, you pick Vampire Counts. Tomb Kings is a really great matchup for Vampire Counts, in my opinion. Vampire Coast, as we said, it's decent with a little bit more favor towards Coast. Don't do the Vampire Count mirror match, please. And Warriors of Chaos are going to ban Wood Elves. You don't want to pick that in the first place out of courtry.
You'd feel like Empire would have a better matchup with such ready access to fire damage.
Well, it's just Vampire Counts don't actually have a lot of units weak to fire other than like Cryptors.
Vargol, Vargai. Varg.
Yeah, and the single entities.
Yeah.
It's like none of their infantry or cavalry. Well, I guess except the Barracks Reavers.
Wait, do Sternsmen not have fire weakness? Yeah, they do.
Oh, right. I forgot about the Sternsmen.
And the Barracks Reavers. And yeah.
It's not too much.
And then it's only the Strigoi generals who have a weakness to fire as well.
Yeah, any lord with regen instead of the hunger.
Oh. I never actually considered that. I thought they were just all going up in flames like the Tomb Kings.
Ew.
Ouch.
Like I feel like when people see undead, they just assume fire damage like counters them, but it is only like a 20% weakness, and it's only on specific units. And there's not a lot of really big burst fire damage. It's like you give units fire damage here or there, or you have a couple units with fire damage that you can either play around or counter yourself. There's a lot of counterplay. Just because they have fire damage doesn't mean you should be super scared.
Pumpkinette saying Skaven is... I've been thinking that Skaven versus Counts is okay for Skaven. Matchup is like... It's can be
slight VC favored.
I feel just like in that matchup, they have such a hard time dealing with Vargolfs.
Yeah.
They just regen. They don't die. If a
It's
help
mainly
hit kills
because
them,
they can't rely on their guns.
help hits smack them, and the Vargulf says, "Haha, lol, JK, you hit me, but I fell on the ground, so you did 0 damage."
Yeah, I think the only ranged Skaven can really bring would be a Warp Lightning Cannon because they're somewhat easy to defend.
Maybe gutter runners.
Yeah, and Night Runners and Gutter Runners, they can be there, but they're not very great versus the mobility. They probably won't be able to get on a Vargulf.
Yeah, I feel like most Skaven players put all their units in this one Death Star with the immune to psychology unit, 2 help hits, whatever. And it can work, but I feel like it's also, you're giving, you're putting yourself in a passive role where you can't make any like big
And you get
plays.
scab scrat to death.
Yeah, that, and also the vampire player can put a Necrarch on a Hell Steed and then Spirit Leech your Lord to death.
Or they
That's-
get like a Dragon Lord with breath attacks with pendulums and
Yeah,
a lot of counterplay.
yeah, it's not a nice matchup, I feel like.
A really common thing that people that don't understand the matchups against vampire counts is their first instinct is to make a blob build. And I would say, unless you know exactly what you're doing with your blob build, I recommend you don't bring one against a vampire counts player, because every vampire counts player and their mother knows how to break a blob. It's like they know it. They've seen it a million times on Quick Battle. And unless you know very specifically what you're doing with it, you probably shouldn't bring it. There's like a few cases where that's why Lizardmen are so picked often against them. That's like one of the easiest blobs to do, but 4 Crypt Horrors literally destroy it. It's hilarious. There's a few traps in all the matchups. Some you guys will be tempted to bring no ranged units against vampire counts because you said, well, vampire counts are so good at getting into my back line. What if I just beat them at their own game and just counter rush them with all melee? Vampire counts will win that most of the time. Well, by saying most of the time, I said they should win that 100% of the time. So don't fall for that trap. Bring ranged units against them, but you have to be very good at protecting them. Another trap, as I said, is the blob builds. The blob builds can win against vampire counts player, but you need to be practiced in the matchup. You can't just say, you know what? Oh, he banned high elves, dark elves. I picked lizardmen. I'm going to throw a dread sword at them, and I beat this player that with my blob build. No, it doesn't work like that. You actually have to find yourself a vampire counts player, practice against them with your blob builds, because then you'll actually have a chance, and figure out what's wrong with your blob builds, because vampire counts are very good at breaking blobs.
Pumpkin wants to know if we could work on how to break blob builds as VC.
Absolutely. So the matchups you see blob builds, actually, I'm going to stream my screen and I'll show you guys a replay I have against Lizardmen. So this is how vampire counts go against blob builds. This happened in the Ever Chosen qualifier. So look at the formation in my army. I have 4. This is against a lizard matchup specifically, but I have 4 Crypt Horrors, 5 zombies in a line, and I have 3 spearmen. I have 3 bats just in case they try to swarm me with air, because bats are really good in this matchup. And I have a mortis engine to deal with infantry, and I have 1 black knight to deal with any sort of like chameleon, skink, harass, and for a unit for like emergency mass. Now, if you look at my army, you should be, every time you build an army in Warhammer, you have to look at the roles and what each unit will, the role in the army. The Crypt Horrors are anti-mass, and they're really good at sticking in infantry. So these guys have the mass to stick on single entity monsters and make sure they protect. Oh, hey there, Banshee. Protect your mortis engine, because your mortis engine in this army, and along with your zombie dragon, is literally the only anti-infantry you really have. And I'm going to spend my entire life to like everything to protect these 2 units. I do have a Banshee for more single entity monster killing, and I do have a Corpse Card of Unholy Lodestone, because regeneration and +5/+5 stats is pretty decent. Now, with that out of the way, we're going to get straight into how I approach them. I have a pretty wide approach. Vampire Count's armies tend to outnumber your opponent quite heavily in almost every matchup because you should be taking zombies in almost every matchup. And you're going to see my opponent has a Dread Saurian. Now, that's like the Vampire Count scary. That's a scary unit. It's like, oh no, I'm going against Vampire Counts. I bring the Dread Saurian. I make a blob build. I have Lore of Life. I've got Temple Guard. I've got all these strong Saurus units that will destroy everything that Vampire Counts can bring. Now, a big mistake. Remember, mistake number 1, bring ranged units against Vampire Counts. When you do not bring ranged units, Vampire Counts players get 100% of the initiative. They control the battlefield, and when they control the battlefield, you lose. Now look at this. No ranged units to stop my dragon. I'm going to send 1 unit of zombies in. This is 100 cost gold. I'm going to trade 100 cost gold for 800. They take the charge. I send Crypt Horrors into Saurus Warriors, Crypt Horrors into Saurus Warriors, and I outnumber him, so I'm just going to surround him. Now, this is when I start seeing something dangerous happening. The Dread Saurian is coming along with Sacred Kroxigor and Star Chambered Guardians. Remember, this guy has no ranged units. I simply pull back my Crypt Horrors. What are they going to do? Chase them? I'm going to pull back my Crypt Horrors. You took out 200 gold's worth of my army, and everything is on the right side. Now, I'm going to take this advantage-wise. You move the Mortis Engine where the Mortis Engine killing properties are not. Notice how the Mortis Engine's over here, the Dread Saurian is on the right, so I send that over there. Oh, what happens when he sends the Dread Saurian left to kill the Mortis Engine? Well, that's when you send in the Crypt Horrors back on the right side. It's all about picking apart the box. Do you guys see that? I'm going to be sending the Banshee to take out the single entity monster, but see, chasing a Mortis Engine when you've got Crypt Horror mass is really tough because Crypt Horrors just hold everything in place. We're going to have another breath attack and just kill this blob over here. But the second he sends something towards a Mortis Engine, you attack in different places. Now he has literally nothing to defend his Mage of Life. And now he's going to have to turn his Dread Saurian ass around. He's going to try to defend his Mage of Life. He's actually going to use the Sacred Kroxigor here as good mass too. And my Mortis Engine is going to be draining away at these infantry while he tries to use this Derp Saurian. That's the main reason why Lizardman players actually lose this. They can't get to the Mortis Engine. Now, another thing that Vampire Counts players should be doing is using their Fellbats to chase units off. I use it right here. I kind of a little late for the thing, but I will be using the Black Knights and the Fellbats to chase units off because 350 for their 800 cost unit never coming back is almost always worth it. I get kind of stuck in here with my Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, but look at this. This 2 horror units plus 2 zombies, that's very cheap, supported by Corpse Cart, is beating Saurus units and the Star Chamber Guardians. Now, you may be asking, hey, Poisonducky, why are you not engaging with everything? Why are you sitting your infantry in the back? Is because they are resources, they're hit points that you should be saving for the entire game for your Crypt Horrors to be sitting on. I've successfully taken out the Saurus, and they will not be coming back to the battlefield. And this Dread Saurian has been trying to chase my stupid Mortis Engine the entire game. Mortis Engine says, whatever, I send my Skeletons plus my Crypt Horror mass to try to keep them stuck in here, and I will be using my Mortis Engine to now kill the Saurus over here. So remember, keep the Mortis away from the elements that can kill it, and you should be okay. Once again, my opponent's not using the Dread Saurian beautifully, to be honest. He should be chasing my Mortis Engine as fast as possible, as much as possible. I think he's trying to kill my Crypt Horrors here, but that's the biggest play. You split what can kill your Mortis Engine with what can kill what essentially that kills the Mortis Engine. And with that, I think the game's essentially over. There's nothing too much. Once you lose your infantry, you can't beat Vampire Counts because they will cycle charge you for years. They will cycle charge you until the end of time, until you lose out. Skeleton, they're going to get banished here, which is not great, but I have so many hit points left on the field. These unit of skeletons, that when the second my zombies reach out, it's okay. The skeletons will come in, they'll act as zombies except better, and the Crypt Horrors will just deal all the damage you need in this army. Notice how I have 1 unit of Crypt Horrors that's fully healthy. I have another one that's at half health. They're regenerating, of course. And I still have the Crypt Horror over here that's living because of the Corpse Guard. Along with this Crypt Horror as well. You keep the Crypt Horrors alive because that's what keeps your army alive. Now, these Sacred Kroxigor are going to be chased off with my Black Knights, and that was pretty much a very effective way of breaking a blob. He can't protect every corner of the blob. There you go. And that's how you beat Lizardmen with vampire counts, essentially. And how a pretty good example of breaking the blobs.
I got a question. The Banshee. I don't know. It was a Lizardman box, a kind of blob build, but it wasn't completely together. There were like multiple blob fights, and I feel like the Banshee is risky if he puts his single entity monsters on the Star Chamber Guardians with the magic attack. Since the Banshee, you wanted to be fighting the big monsters.
You just don't send the Banshee in until the infantry is like. You just try and focus your breath attacks on the Star Chamber Guardian.
Yeah, the great thing about the Mortis engine is that it has to only be in combat to have its draining effect. So let's say there's one Saurus over here. If I send my Mortis engine to this Saurus, he will be draining Saurus that are like over here, even though it's in combat over here, right? So if the Star Chamber is sitting on top of the Dread Saurian, you find this unit of infantry, you start draining it, and the Star Chambers are going to be drained just as if the Mortis engine was fighting.
Yeah, I get that. My thought process is only that maybe I personally like a Terrorgeist more than a Banshee. You get the breath attacks, you know, he's a bit more mobile, I feel like.
There's multiple ways you can.
Against,
Yeah, this is my
monsters,
build.
right?
Terrorgeists definitely are good in this matchup as well.
I guess it's a cost difference, isn't it? A Banshee's cheaper than a Goose.
Yeah, if you bring a Goose instead of a Banshee, you probably have to sacrifice something pretty big in your army. Like
a Banshee is like 800 gold, and then the Terrorgeist like 2,000. So.
Do you take anything on the Banshee?
No, I take off everything.
Yeah, stripped down
Then
Banshee
it's
is
1300.
750.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it
So
goes.
1300
800.
difference.
Oh, 1,300 difference. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The question was asked how to break blobs, essentially. Blob breaking, and it's the answer is simply put. That was more of an example, but simply put is just spreading the blob, making them forced to go to different positions in the blob, and using if let's say the enemy player says, "Hey, I know what you're doing. You're spreading in my blob. I'm going to stay tight." That's where breath attacks come in. They're pretty good, it turns out. Or cycle. Breath attacks and cycle charging.
And to not throw all your infantry in at once. You want to save their HP because splash damage from the blob monsters can hurt you unnecessarily.
Yep. As Taco was saying, another really important thing about Vampire Counts play is to not send in everything at once. I was literally joking about this earlier, but it is the correct thing to do to send zombies at your enemies and just look at them menacingly.
Like, instead of like having them fight into melee, sometimes when you're trying to get a positional advantage, just sitting in front of the unit and falling back if they chase can have the same effect because they're like, let's say the unit you're blocking is more expensive, which since it's zombies, almost any unit is going to be more expensive. So if they pull away from the zombies that are sitting in front of them, then the zombies can move forward and maybe get into the back line or something like that, or create pressure elsewhere, because they're going to need those funds elsewhere to protect where you're moving or attacking. But if you're just sitting in one area, you're making them make a decision on either they have to pull back to go defend somewhere else, or they have to try to chase the zombies. And if the zombies pull back, then they're getting out of position.
So,
I can give another visual explanation of that as well if you guys want it. So this is against dwarves. A lot of people will bring this dwarves against vampire counts because it's easy. Right? I hate this map. You'll see once I load in. Ugh.
No, it's Sandy.
Oh,
way too brave.
that glare is.
It's just awful. So I'll explain this build against the Dawi opponent. You guys should be like getting used to building your own. Since Dawi, you don't need anti-large. You bring everything anti-infantry or disruption. I'll have 4 units of Graveguard with great weapons because they're good against dwarf warriors and they do well against long beards as long as they have support in some way, like a corpse cart or a necromancer that lets them regenerate. Now I do bring the one pick that usually some people don't bring often, I guess. I don't see this matchup too often other than when I play it, is Stearnsman, and that's because they just take forever to kill and they allow you to cycle charge roll. I have 2 skeletons on the left flank and 1 skeleton on the right flank. You have to have Fellbats against the dwarf matchup or Gyrocopters will kill you. You can go big brain and say, I know he's not going to bring Gyrocopters against me because I know he knows I have Fellbats, but just bring them. Don't try to bring too much. Now you do have my 2 cycle charging units, my Black Coach and my Blood Dragon Vampire Lord here. You bring the Blood Dragon in this case because with the Helm of Discord, you decrease their melee defense, and dwarves have a lot of melee defense, right? It's really hard to kill them. Now over here on the dwarf side, we've got what is a pretty common anti-vampire count build. So he knows that I'm going to bring Graveguard with great weapons, right? This is Pugnabon. He's a member of the XMT. He's an awesome guy. Hammerers beat Graveguard with great weapons. Hammerers beat zombies. Hammers beat everything in terms of infantry. So, but they do lose to cycle charging. And what killed cycle charging units on the Vampire Counts roster? 3 Iron Drakes. It's a very simple build. And you have 2 Slayers to protect them. You've got Thorgrim to give melee attack, and you've got a Runesmith to make sure I slows down whatever tries to cycle charge the Iron Drakes, because that's how you beat Iron Drakes by cycle charging them, or the Iron Drakes, or in disrupting them, or the Iron Drakes kill my large. Now you're going to see my approach here. My dwarf friend is legitimately going to be cheesy, and he's going to use this. He's going to use this terrain here because you should in a tournament game. If you have the resources, use it. I'm going to send my Black Coach over here, and the approach is pretty important here. Notice how my zombies, usually a lot of dwarf players will have blasting charges or cannons or something. So that's why you generally want to put your zombies in front. I joke about this all the time, but Graveguard with great weapons don't have shields unless you spend 100 extra gold, which is zombies. They all of a sudden get gold shields. It might as well be like the silver shields are useless. These are gold shields. Like he tries to shoot them. And here comes the main engagement here. I actually slow this down. Notice that I actually send the zombies back. They were in the same, they acted as shields, but I send the zombies back here. And I don't engage them into the hammers. Now, this is going to be important later on because I'm not wasting these hit points. I'm sending the units that want to be fighting these hammerers along with support, and I'm going to be going with a surround over here. And my Fellbats are coming in. I have that 1 unit of Skelly Boys. Now, it's going to be Graveguard versus Hammers, which remember said Graveguard lose this fight unless they have support of some sort, like corpse carts and things like this. Now, really important thing here is that because my opponent doesn't, it's a box build, and Iron Drakes with Trollhammer torpedoes have not the longest range in the world, right? So you can actually go to the very edges, and if they have Thunderers here, they would be shooting at your dragon and stuff like that, but Thunderers don't deal the highest damage per second. My opinion in this matchup is it's worth taking the damage of getting shot at for good breath attacks, because that's your win condition. You take away their hammerers, there's no way to kill your Graveguard with great weapons. We have to think about win conditions here. So breath attack down here. I was expecting to get shot by some Trollhammer torpedoes, but it doesn't quite happen. And look at this. 1 breath attack equals peak gate guard at like 20% health. So that's one of their most valuable units almost dead. And they're going to be fighting against Graveguard with great weapons with corpse cart support, and they'll be okay. Now remember, the zombies are not engaging here. I could be throwing the zombies in, but I'm not going to. Now here's going to be a thing. A Black Coach is going to get sent in here to try to disrupt the back line. And here's the zombies, all right? They come in and they're going to be the hit points that they need to try to just stop the Slayers. All these engagements going on, and my Fellbats are sitting back because there's really nothing to chase off quite yet. See, once here again, I send in this Graveguard. I don't actually engage with the zombies. They're literally going to stare at the enemy, sitting there doing nothing. These guys are sitting here doing absolutely nothing. You pull them back. You send in what actually is useful against them. You push forward Graveguard while pushing back the zombies, because hit points are very good in this build. You don't notice these guys. I didn't miss micro at all, I swear. Now, these Black Coaches, the Black Coach is going to be taken out here because of Wrath of Ruin, which is good, but that's resources being spent, and I'm going to be using my dragon to take advantage of that. Now, even though, let's say this, even though I spent a breath attack and the Graveguard took they fought the Peak Gate Guard, they still beat them because they took some friendly fire from the breath attack. Oh no, now you send in, good thing I saved my zombies and I didn't blob up against my dwarf opponent. So he's going to try to use the hammers here to try to defend his Iron Drakes, but I have zombies and these guys have a lot of hit points and they're going to be forced to fight while I send in over my Blood Dragon. The reason I send my Blood Dragons is because I know he spent his slow already on the Corpse Card. Poor Corpse Card. He didn't deserve what happened. I'm not Corpse Card, Black Coach. I'm going to go for Disruption. Vampire counts are really good at Disruption. So make a zombie summon on top of the Iron Drakes. They'll be good for that. And look at this. Use the other units that are not fighting. You make a concave. I'm going to have skeleton warriors coming out to the back. This one unit that had the longest trek in his goddamn life is going to make his unlife is going to make his trek, and he's going to act as disruption. Use your hit points wisely. Remember when I spent back the zombies sent back Graveguard fighting dwarf warriors. Graveguard win that fight, so I can get into their front line. And here comes some good old-fashioned fell bat incursions. You know, we're going to use these fell bats to try to disrupt these armed drakes because he's getting good shots into my Blood Dragon Lord. It's going to be inevitable that when you use your large units that the dwarf player is going to shoot your large unit and it's going to deal a lot of damage. But remember, you always need to be looking for good breath attacks, break up the blobs, kill the important units, specifically hammers in this case, that need to be killed. Now that's one hammer routing. That is a lot of money to be coming here. And that one skeleton unit is just... he's going to come here and chase. And remember, chasing off units is super important as vampire counts because you don't want to deal with them. Dwarves have a lot of leadership, and I believe I'm going to cut it. If I'm a good player, I'm going to send a vampire, a fell bat. Yeah, I'm a good player. I swear, guys. A fell bat to try to make these hammers never come back. Now over here, the dwarf player is overcommitting his resources on a unit of zombies and Graveguard that are supported by a corpse cart. The zombies are just essentially being hit points since the Graveguard actually died already. I already sent them preemptively. And I'm winning this flank pretty decisively because of my breath attacks and getting into these. Now, they're on guard mode because the Iron Drakes, I'll actually continue firing, even though in melee combat with skeletons, which is a little scary. But I'm going to get some zombie dragon charging in there, and he has nothing to defend them because I've dealt with all the infantry of the dwarf player and sending back my stern guards to regenerate. Now, don't mind me. Don't mind the fact that I forgot an entire unit of Graveguard, Great Weapons, and zombies on the left flank. Because here's another great thing about vampire counts. Your micro, you just need less. You need less micro with this faction. It's kind of a matter of fact. Your micro is not nearly as important. Well, it is important, but you need it less than other factions.
It might depend on the matchup.
Yeah, like if you bring like Blood Knights, for instance. But in this matchup, my micro could be trash, and it was. And I still have the advantage because I have this one guy.
Well, your micro wasn't that bad. You had good, you sent in units and you were mindful to pull your other ones back.
Yeah,
And
I feel like the fact that you didn't have all your resources in play just further illustrates how good of a strategy this is.
Yeah, it further shows you that you don't send in everything at once. They're called tactical reserves, remember. Now, at this point, tactical reserves. Now, I'm going to be just dodging back and forth with the Blood Dragon Lord because for some reason, even though they're getting stuck at by skeleton warriors, getting smacked by zombies and everything, the dwarf says, I don't care. And I'm going to shoot at your dragon, and I'm going to panic a little bit and just make him fly over there.
Yeah.
And an Invocation and a Heckham, which is a very balanced spell. But I have this surround over here. My Graveguard are going to be so wood. And the more important thing is that all my infantry are on top of his Iron Drakes. The only way, and I say the only way to kill my zombie dragon is to kill it with Iron Drakes. And once those are out of the way, I can kill the rest of my army with a zombie dragon. Now, it's going to be kind of... I've used all 3 breath attacks already. They were on Slayers and Hammerers, very important, so they don't kill the Graveguard, and the Graveguard can kill the Iron Drakes. And I'm just literally going to be dancing. But I believe... Yeah, I remember that one unit of zombies.
Sure.
And it's literally... I have my mana battery giving me Forbidden Rod. He's going to give me magic protection throughout the entire time. And remember, I'm chasing off these Iron Drakes. The second they start routing... Oh, I actually get a little scared there because he Wrath of Ruins me. I got really scared. Box build is dead, and vampire counts what prevail. And I'm just going to fast forward here because I'm going to do what all vampire counts players do, and everyone complains about, and it's called cycle charging.